Story 1. Christmas Eve Visitor. It was Christmas Eve in the small town of St. Nicholas, and the Mendes family was eagerly anticipating the celebrations. The house was adorned with twinkling lights, a resplendent Christmas tree, and decorations everywhere. John, the father, was taking care of the final preparations in the kitchen, while Clara, the mother, was helping their children, Anna and Peter, hang stockings by the fireplace. The children were especially excited that night. Anna, 6, and Peter, 8, couldn't stop talking about the presents they hoped to receive from Santa Claus. Snow was gently falling outside, creating a cozy and festive atmosphere inside the house. "Let's leave cookies and milk for Santa," suggested Anna, her face glowing with excitement. "Great idea, sweetheart," Clara replied, grabbing a tray to set out the cookie. After dinner, the family gathered in the living room to watch a Christmas movie. The children, exhausted from the day's excitement, eventually fell asleep on the couch. John and Clara carried them to their rooms, tucking them into bed and wishing them a good night. Later, when the house was silent, John and Clara went to bed, ready for a peaceful night. However, shortly after turning off the lights, they began to hear strange noises coming from the roof. "Must be the wind," John said, trying to reassure his wife. "Or maybe it's Santa Claus," Clara joked, though she was a bit nervous. The sounds continued, and Clara decided to get up and investigate. She went to the window and looked outside but saw nothing but the gently falling snow. She returned to bed, trying to ignore the feeling of unease. In the middle of the night, they were awakened again, this time by a louder noise. It sounded like someone was walking down the hallway. John got up and went to the children's room to check if everything was okay. To his surprise, he found the beds empty. "Clara, the kids aren't here," he exclaimed, panic in his voice. Clara ran to the children's room and saw that John was right. Anna and Peter were gone. They began to search frantically around the house, calling for their children, but there was no response. When they reached the living room, they noticed the back door was ajar, letting in a gust of cold wind. "What is happening?" Clara asked, trembling with fear. "Let's go outside, we need to find them," John said, grabbing a flashlight and heading into the snow. They followed the small footprints leading to the backyard, where a tall figure in a heavy coat and hood stood. He held the children's hands, and they seemed to be in a trance, unresponsive to their parents' calls. "Let go of our children," John shouted, advancing with the flashlight in hand. The figure lifted its head, revealing a pale face and eyes that glowed sinisterly in the darkness. "They came with me willingly," he said in a low, menacing voice. "I am the true spirit of Christmas, the one who comes to take away naughty children." "This is madness," Clara exclaimed. "Let them go." The man laughed, a chilling sound that froze John and Clara's hearts. "You don't understand, they belong to me now." Desperate, John lunged to grab his children. The figure raised a hand and an invisible force threw him back, making him fall into the snow. Clara ran to help him, felt a chill down her spine as the man began to approach again. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared behind the figure, and it let out a scream of pain. John and Clara saw an elderly man with a white beard, dressed in old-fashioned winter clothes, holding a silver cross. "Return to the shadows from whence you came, evil spirit," the man commanded in a firm, authoritative voice. The sinister figure recoiled, releasing the children who collapsed unconscious in the snow. "This isn't over," growled before disappearing into the darkness. The elderly man approached John and Clara, helping them to their feet. "You need to be more careful. Christmas traditions are older and more dangerous than you realize." "Who are you?" John asked, still in shock. "My name is Nicholas," the man replied with a gentle smile. "Let's just say I'm a protector of children and Christmas tradition. Now, take your children inside. They will be fine." John and Clara carried Anna and Peter back into the house and put them in their beds. Children began to wake up, confused but with no memory of what had happened. "Was it a nightmare?" Peter asked, rubbing his eyes. "Yes, it was just a nightmare," Clara said, stroking her son's hair. "Now go back to sleep. Everything is okay." On Christmas morning, the family woke up with a sense of relief and gratitude. Though the previous night had been terrifying, they were together and safe. John and Clara told the story to a few close friends, but many doubted its truth, thinking it was just a scary Christmas tale. However, John and Clara knew the truth. They knew that Christmas was not only a time of joy and celebration, but also a time when ancient and powerful forces could manifest. And they knew that, thanks to a mysterious protector, they had been saved from a dark fate. The Mendez family never celebrated Christmas the same way again. Traditions continued, but always with a renewed reverence and respect. And every year on Christmas Eve, they lit a candle in gratitude to Nicholas, guardian of children. Story 2. Christmas Dollhouse. Sophie had always loved Christmas. The festive season brought back warm memories of her childhood, especially the celebrations with her grandmother, Mrs. Helen. Mrs. Helen was a woman of fragile appearance, vibrant spirit. Her house, an old building full of history, had always been the center of the family's Christmas festivities. This year, Sophie decided to spend Christmas with her grandmother, eager to relive the traditions and enjoy her dear relatives' company. When she arrived at Mrs. Helen's house, she was greeted with a warm hug and the familiar smell of gingerbread cookies baking in the oven. "Sophie, dear, it's so good to see you," exclaimed Mrs. Helen, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Grandma, I missed you so much," Sophie replied, hugging her tightly. The house was lavishly decorated with garlands, twinkling lights, and a majestic Christmas tree in the corner of the living room. But what caught Sophie's attention the most was her grandmother's doll collection. Mrs. Helen had always had a passion for antique dolls. Her collection was famous among collectors. Every room in the house had shelves full of porcelain dolls, dressed in elaborate outfits with hand-painted faces. That night after dinner, Mrs. Helen called Sophie to the living room. "I have a special gift for you," she said with an enigmatic smile. Sophie sat on the couch, curious, while her grandmother brought out an elegant box decorated with gold ribbon. "Here it is, my dear. This doll is very special to me, and I want you to have it." Sophie opened the box and found a beautifully dressed doll with bright blue eyes and curly blonde hair. "She's beautiful, Grandma, thank you," Sophie said, enchanted. "This doll has an interesting story," Mrs. Helen said, sitting next to Sophie. "She belonged to a very dear friend who unfortunately passed away many years ago. I've always felt that the doll holds a piece of her soul." Sophie smiled but felt a slight shiver. "It's a beautiful story, Grandma. I'll take good care of her." That night, Sophie placed the doll on a shelf next to her bed and quickly fell asleep. However, her sleep was interrupted by soft whispers and the sound of light footsteps. She opened her eyes and saw the doll, now on the floor next to the bed, staring at her with its glassy eyes. It must have fallen, she thought, putting the doll back on the shelf before going back to sleep. Next morning, she told her grandmother about what happened. "You must have knocked the doll off during your sleep, dear." "Don't worry," Mrs. Helen said, with a reassuring smile. But the following nights brought more strange events. The doll appeared in different places around the room, and Sophie heard laughter and whispers when she was alone. She decided to investigate more about the doll's history and found an old diary in her grandmother's room. In the diary, Mrs. Helen wrote about her friend Clara, who had died under mysterious circumstances. The last pages described Clara as someone obsessed with the doll, believing it had supernatural powers. Clara used to say the doll talked to her, that it protected her. "But after Clara died, I started noticing strange things too," Sophie read aloud. "Did the doll really hold Clara's soul?" Sophie confronted her grandmother with her discoveries. "Grandma, this doll is doing strange things. What really happened to Clara?" Mrs. Helen sighed, her eyes filled with sadness. "Clara was my best friend. She became obsessed with the doll and started acting strangely. One day I found her dead in her room with the doll beside her. Since then, I've felt that the doll was somehow connected to Clara's soul." "Why did you give me this doll then?" Sophie asked, confused. "Because I needed help, Sophie," Mrs. Helen said. "I feel that the doll is becoming more powerful and needed someone trustworthy to figure out how to free Clara." That night, Sophie decided to confront the doll. She took a crucifix and a book of prayers she found in her grandmother's library and returned to her room. She placed the doll in the center of the bed and began to pray, hoping to free Clara's spirit. As she prayed, the doll began to move, its eyes glowing with an intense blue light. The whispers grew louder, and Sophie felt a cold presence around her. "Clara, if you're here, show yourself," she shouted, holding the crucifix firmly. A nebulous form began to materialize beside the doll, taking the shape of a young woman. "Please help me," figure said, her voice soft and full of despair. "I've been trapped here for so long." Sophie continued to pray, and the figure began to dissipate. "Clara, you are free. Go in peace," Sophie said, tears in her eyes. The doll fell to the floor, lifeless, and the whispers ceased. Sophie felt a wave of relief and exhaustion at the same time. She took the doll to her grandmother. "Grandma, I think we did it. Clara is free," Sophie said, showing the now lifeless doll. Mrs. Helen hugged Sophie, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "Thank you, dear. You did what I couldn't do for so many years." On Christmas morning, the house was filled with a renewed sense of peace. Mrs. Helen decided to burn the doll to ensure that Clara was truly free. Sophie helped her grandmother, and together they watched the doll disappear into the flames, taking all the secrets and horrors of the past with it. The experience strengthened the bond between Sophie and her grandmother, and they both came to cherish their time together even more. Although that year's Christmas had been marked by frightening events, it also brought new understanding and necessary closure to an old story. Story 3. The Cursed Gift. It was a quiet Christmas Eve at Peter and Anna's house. They had recently moved to a modern home in a big city, seeking a fresh start for their small family. The couple and their 4-year-old son, Michael, were excited to spend their first Christmas in the new house. The house was decorated in a minimalist but cozy style. Christmas lights twinkled on the porch, and a well-decorated Christmas tree occupied a corner of the living room. Peter was finishing placing the presents under the tree, while Anna prepared dinner in the kitchen. "Did you see the gift that was left at the door?" Peter asked, walking into the kitchen. "No, what gift?" Anna replied, surprised. "I found a wrapped gift left at our door. It doesn't have a card, but it looks quite old," Peter said, showing the box wrapped in red paper with a gold bow. Anna looked at the gift with suspicion. "Strange. Maybe it's from a neighbor. We'll open it after dinner." After a delicious meal, the family gathered around the Christmas tree to open presents. Michael was especially excited, tearing through the wrapping paper with enthusiasm. Finally, Peter picked up the mysterious gift and began to unwrap it. Inside the box was an old toy, finely carved and painted wooden rocking horse. It looked like an antique but was in excellent condition. "It's beautiful. But who would have sent this?" Anna asked, admiring the toy. Michael, his eyes shining with joy, immediately wanted to play with the rocking horse. "Is it mine, Daddy?" he asked eagerly. Peter laughed. "Of course, son. It looks like Santa left this for you." The evening continued peacefully, but Anna couldn't shake the feeling of unease about the gift's mysterious origin. Something about the toy unsettled her. She tried to ignore the feeling, thinking she was just being paranoid. That night, as everyone slept, Anna was awakened by the soft sound of laughter coming from Michael's room. She got up and went to her son's room, where she found Michael sitting on the bed, holding the wooden rocking horse. "Michael, why are you awake?" she asked, sitting beside him. "The rocking horse is telling me a story, Mommy," Michael said, with an innocent smile. Anna felt a chill. "What story, my love?" "He said he came from a big house and wants to take me to meet his friends," Michael replied, still holding the toy. Anna took the rocking horse from Michael's hands and placed it on the shelf. "It's time to sleep, sweetheart. You can play more tomorrow." Michael lay down, and Anna stayed by his side until he fell asleep again. She returned to her room, but had difficulty sleeping, disturbed by her son's words. In the following days, Michael began to behave strangely. He spent hours playing with the wooden rocking horse, talking to it as if it were a real friend. Peter and Anna grew increasingly worried, especially when Michael began having frequent nightmares and waking up screaming during the night. One night, while Anna was in the kitchen, she heard Michael talking to the rocking horse again. She decided it was time to investigate the toy's origin. She asked Peter to keep an eye on Michael while she tried to find out more about the mysterious gift. Anna began researching antique wooden rocking horses and found an article about a wealthy family who had lived in a mansion in the same city many years ago. According to the story, the family had a son named Thomas who tragically died in an accident involving his favorite wooden rocking horse. Since then, there had been rumors that Thomas's spirit haunted the toy. Terrified by the discovery, Anna ran to tell Peter. "Peter, we need to get rid of this rocking horse. I think it's possessed by the spirit of a child who died many years ago." Peter, initially skeptical, agreed to dispose of the toy when he saw the panic in Anna's eyes. He took the wooden rocking horse to the basement, locking it in a box. That night, Michael had a terrible nightmare. He woke up screaming, saying that Thomas was angry because they had locked away his toy. Peter and Anna decided they needed to do more to protect their son. Remembering the stories her grandmother used to tell about exorcisms and purification rituals, Anna called a local priest to bless the house and rid it of any malevolent presence. The priest, kind and understanding man, arrived the next morning and began the ritual. "This toy carries a very strong negative energy," the priest said, holding the rocking horse. "We need to destroy it to ensure the spirit finds peace." They took the toy to the backyard and burned it in a bonfire. Michael, though initially upset, seemed to understand it was necessary. The priest completed the ritual, blessing the house and each family member. After that day, Michael returned to his normal behavior, and the nightmares ceased. Peter and Anna felt a renewed peace in their home, knowing they had done what was necessary to protect their son. On Christmas morning, the family woke up with a sense of relief and gratitude. As they opened their presents, Anna found an anonymous letter on the Christmas tree. "Thank you for freeing my spirit. Now I can rest in peace. Merry Christmas, Thomas." Anna felt tears well up as she read the letter. She knew they had done the right thing and that Thomas's spirit had finally found rest. The experience strengthened the bond between Peter, Anna, and Michael, and they came to cherish their time together even more. That year's Christmas was unlike any other, marked by the struggle against the unknown and the triumph over fear.